What was the best moment you've seen when the real world hit a spoiled kid? Story 1. I guess I'll start. Definitely was not the best, but it still pleased me. I used to work at a pony camp that catered to rich kids from a very nice neighborhood. We would have really spoiled kids all the time. While annoying, the most frustrating part is trying to maintain authority just so the little shits don't get themselves by 1,000-pound animals. Anyways, we had a maybe 10-year-old kid from some mildly famous sportscaster one week. The kid was just downright awful. She ignored everything we told her and was mean to the other kids in camp. At one point, she started a physical fight with another girl, and when she felt like she was getting beaten, she started yelling, "Do you know who my mom is? I'm going to tell her." The other kid got scared and started crying. My coworker replied, "Actually, I do know your mom, and I know she wouldn't like to hear about this. Why don't I call her right now?" The little brat didn't believe her, so my coworker did. She was much easier to deal with the rest of the week. Story 2. I worked at Taco Bell in high school. At the time, we had kids' meals. This kid comes in with his parents and orders a kid's meal. Apparently, he had been in recently and already had that toy. He started screaming at me to get him another toy. His dad looked at me with an absolutely dejected look on his face and begged me to go get the toy. I dug through the new box of toys and found one. The kid ripped it out of my hands and ran outside directly into a rose bush. My coworker was legit laying on the ground laughing. Story 3. This one was told to me by my parents since I was too young to remember at the time. The neighborhood bus stop for the Catholic high school was on the corner where our house sits. Sometimes when it was raining, the kids would wait right next to our house for cover. That didn't bother my parents. They had kids. They didn't want somebody else's kids standing out in the rain. What did bother them was when they realized the kids started passing the time by ripping up all the flowers around the house. Parents called the school to complain and had a nice chat with the principal. That Saturday, all the kids who used that stop showed up to replant the flowers, which they or their parents paid for. When the flowers were replanted, they got to spend a few more hours helping with our other yard work. Then the school moved its bus stop to the main road on the edge of the neighborhood. That meant about 2 more blocks of walking every day for most of them and waiting in a field with no shelter from bad weather. Props to the school for really cracking down on that. I went to a public school, and based on the way they handled the little at my school, they would have said something like, "Well, don't have flowers if you don't want kids to ruin them." Story 4. On the first day of a 2-week vacation, I saw my spoiled 10-year-old cousin tell his mother, his older female cousin, his aunt, and his grandmother that he wasn't going to clear his place or rinse his dishes, because that's women's work. For the rest of that 2-week vacation, nobody had to lift a finger to clear a plate, rinse a dish, or wash a pot because it was his job. At times, there were over a dozen of us there. Story 5. I was about 15. I was in the woods with some friends, local public nature reserve, playing on a rope swing, drinking energy drinks and eating snacks, chatting, and just having a good time, keeping to ourselves really. The rope swings itself was on a very tall tree, hanging over what I can only explain as a miniature valley. 2 small hills, a gap in the middle, rope swing on one side but will reach the other side. Then some kids came along on their bikes, maybe between 10 and 12 years old, dressed up in tracksuits and quite mouthy. You know the type. They told us to move along from their rope swing. It wasn't theirs. I set that thing up myself because I was like a Spider-Man kid back then. I could climb anything. Obviously, we said no, but we did say we'll leave them to it for a bit if they want to have a go. There's no reason we can't all enjoy it. They wouldn't take that answer, so we carried on playing on the rope swing, but then they began throwing sticks and rocks at us, which didn't faze us. Next thing, one of them tries to show off and speeds down the hill on his bike to try and grab me while I swing, but his mate throws a stick at the same time and it lodges in his wheel and sends him flying down the hill. To add insult to injury, he flies right in my swing path and gets 2 knees to the ribs. Completely took the wind out of him, and so they all left feeling defeated. It feels good because we did nothing out of order. The cards just worked in our favor. Story 6. I worked as an outdoor camp instructor. One week I was on logistics and had to drive the van to pick up kids. I had heard from my friend that one of the kids in this group was a little back-chatting, lazy, and bullying other kids. When I got to the pickup point, the kids hopped into the van and my mate Mitch gave me the rundown of the kid. As I started the van up, I did a visual check of seatbelts and everyone was good except for the kid. I asked and he said no, so I told him I can't leave until he puts it on. A minute down the road, I heard him unclip his seatbelt again, so I had to stop the van and ask him again. He put it back on, and this happened one more time. On the third time, I just pulled over and turned the van off, radioed base, and asked for my manager and the overseeing teacher, who was his dean, to come up and pick this kid up because he was a danger to the others in the van. That's when this kid started pleading and begging. Told him no, I already made the call and it was definite that he got sent home. My mate Mitch had one of his best weeks after this kid left. Story 7. Working at Chuck E. Cheese for 1 year. Some little kid keeps getting pissed because he can't win many tickets from a game. The kid begins to kick and scream, toss things around, etc. I think he tries to hit one of the animatronics. When someone tried to get him to stop, he pulled the "Do you know who my dad is? Do you know what he can do to you?" We all just shook our heads and didn't know what to say. Was his dad the owner or was he rich? We see this guy in a business suit just standing there with a really pissed off look on his face. It was the kind of face that you look at and wonder if this man ever smiled. The kid just froze up and muttered something. The man apologized and walked away. He came back a few hours later and gave all the employees gifts. I got an Xbox 360, so I guess karma worked in our favor. Story 8. We were poor growing up, like ham or cheese sandwich poor. When I was 13, I asked my single mother to combine Christmas and birthday gifts, which is in March. I wanted a nice bike for years but didn't want to ask for anything specific. I was happy with any gift. I asked very respectfully for a Dino Compy bicycle. My awesome mom delivered, and in March I got my favorite present of all time. Within 3 or 4 days, my best friend and his little brother, who of course were very well off, showed up at my house, both with higher-end freestyle bikes. We went for a ride and the brothers ended up grazing each other and creating a scratch on the older brother's bike. He was furious and slammed his own bike on the ground, then knocked his little brother over and commenced stomping every spoke out of both wheels. The younger brother returned the favor on the other bicycle. They then actually had a contest to see who could destroy a bicycle more drastically. This was the first time I think my jaw dropped and I was speechless. Once I regained my orientation, I just turned and pedaled away. I immediately started crying at why kids would trash brand new bicycles. They both showed up that weekend with 2 new bikes. I made up some lie and I was grounded. I couldn't be friends with someone like that anymore. I just thought my mom worked so hard for my bike and these guys destroyed $800. If my mom knew, I wouldn't even be allowed to be friends with them. Damn, good for you for taking their actions as a warning, not an example. That's pretty perceptive for a 13-year-old kid. It's awesome that even at that age you showed a lot more maturity than those 2 kids and realized what your mom had to sacrifice and work hard for. I don't blame you for not wanting to hang out with them anymore. That was definitely a good decision on your end. Story 9. When I was 11, there was this one kid in the neighborhood who was never disciplined, and as a result got away with whatever. He loved to steal food. My best friend in the neighborhood was Latina, and as such grew up on spicy and would walk around snacking on flaming hot Cheetos and such. I gingerly tried them and got used to them after a while. So soon I was walking around with my own bag. This spoiled kid decided he wanted some and grabbed the bag from me, which I didn't even fight him on this time. I had planned this and walked over by his house to instigate. He had one single Cheeto and started crying right away and ran to his mom. He didn't steal my stuff after that. Flamin' Hot Cheetos are the perfect snack. Most people don't bug you wanting some, and when the odd person does, they're generally cool since they like them. The few people that have never had them and want a couple are priceless to watch as they try them and inevitably get burnt down. Story 10. I used to work at a women's shelter. Christmas time rolls around and a man and his sourpuss teenaged son comes to the door. He says his son would like to donate some items to the kids staying at the shelter. Great. The man and his son start hauling in some expensive items. There was an Xbox, a bunch of games, a flat screen, iPod, cool headset, etc. Turns out the kid ran his mouth and the dad made him give everything to the kids. Christmas was pretty cool for our shelter that year. Reply 1. Whoa, I think I actually know this kid and his dad because I heard the other side of his story, which was son texted a friend telling them how his parents were for not being able to buy him the Xbox he wanted. His parents had already bought the Xbox, but then dad saw the texts and decided kid didn't deserve the gifts. So I wonder if we're talking about the same people. Story 11. My neighbor down the street and his little brother were 2 of the most spoiled kids I'd ever meet. and their mother was just horrible. For context, the younger brother's first word was one day, the younger brother was having a vicious temper tantrum while I was over playing some GTA 5 with the older sibling. Unprovoked, he threw a pair of scissors that hit my elbow, and I had to go to the hospital for stitches. His mother just yelled at him, which I felt wasn't sufficient justice. The next day, I went back, left my arm in a sling, and smashed that little in the face with the PS4 controller and left. Haven't heard from him since, but I think that humbled him at least a little. Story 12. I think I was around 9 or so, and I made friends with another kid down the road. Was his parents' place, and he visited a lot. If I remember correctly, we met through baseball. He was incredibly overweight and bossy. He always made the rules of the games we played and would throw major tantrums if I objected. For instance, while playing with action figures, I had the toy do some cool flips. He went crazy, saying how it needed to be realistic. The first time I visited his house, I was blown away by the volume of toys he had. Growing up fairly poor, I was accustomed to having maybe one cool toy. He had all the PlayStation games and a huge collection of anime. Not surprisingly, his parents were overweight as well and would make dense dinners that would take me 2 days to recover from. Eventually, one sleepover, he wanted to play wrestle. Didn't take but a second to know how bad of an idea that is, him being 100 pounds plus, especially since he wanted us to be shirtless. I refused and he cried, telling me to take my shirt off and to wrestle. I remember walking out and asking his mom for a ride home. She just gave me the look, which told me she understood everything. 2 days later, he shows up at my house asking for me to come out. My brother told him I wasn't home as I walked by the kitchen. He flipped his and that's the last I heard of him. Story 13. Not really a kid since the dude was in his 40s, but he acted like one. His mother paid for his life, which included rent, bills, food, everything. He was super mean to her whenever she would call, and he had a crazy bad temper. I was homeless at the time, and my former boyfriend and I would come around his place sometimes. He would say the most up it to me. One time he asked me if women were even human. Anyway, he always made kind of a point to throw money around casually and rip on us for being homeless. For example, he asked my ex to install a new lock for him, agreed to pay him some bullshit lowball amount, and then never paid at all. The last day I saw him, he got pissed off about something and threw a keg at my ex's head. His place was full of music equipment he never used, like guitars, drums, amps, soundboards, all kinds of expensive stuff. My ex dodged the keg and it flew and hit a bunch of equipment. The dude proceeded to completely trash all of his own stuff in a man-toddler rage. As we left, he followed us down the street screaming obscenities and threatening to me. Then, I didn't get to witness this myself, unfortunately. He apparently got arrested because he mouthed off to a cop and told her he owns the LAPD, and that she could arrest him later, but he was busy right then. I actually know this officer, and I wish I could have seen her face when he said all that. Suffice it to say, she wasn't having that and took him to jail. And I heard that when he got out some months later, he'd been kicked out of his place and all his stuff was gone. Pretty sure he's homeless now. Story 14. I played football in the local kids league. One kid from another team was basically untouchable, as his dad was a major sponsor of the league and would donate money for uniforms, drinks, etc. His son was a pretty good receiver but didn't like getting hit, and his parents made a big deal of leaving their son alone so he can develop his skills. He was insufferable. Anytime he scored a touchdown, he would do over-the-top celebrations and mock all the other players, his teammates included. Then came high school. Most of the kids from the league ended up in 1 or 2 schools. He went to mine and some other players. During tryouts, he did well. The coaches were mostly focused on skills and minimal contact during the first few rounds of cuts. The final round was when things got interesting. Full contact was permitted, and he got rocked over and over again. No one was actually trying to tackle any harder than normal. It's just this dude didn't know what to do when he got tackled, so he screamed and cried a lot. He didn't make the team, until his dad came down to the school and offered to donate money for uniforms and some other goodies for our sports teams. So he made the team, and again, we were told to take it easy on him a bit. So we did, but the other teams didn't. And he went up against some of the players he mocked previously, and they remembered. Our quarterback kept passing to him, and he was getting repeatedly smashed over and over again. It was the only time our team cheered for the other team. He quit playing football after that.